The quiet of the house had become a constant companion since Martha left. 6 months it had been, and every creak of the old Charleston floorboards, every rustle of the palmetto outside the window, seemed to echo her absence. We'd spent nearly 40 years together in this home, surrounded by the ghosts of history we both loved. Our shared passion for the past, the meticulous sorting of forgotten letters, the thrill of a newly discovered provenance. Those were the threads that wove our life together. Now the silence was deafening, and the vast collection of historical documents, the legacy I'd spent a lifetime accumulating, felt less like a comfort and more like a crushing weight. My final book, the one I'd promised Martha I'd finish, sat half done on my desk. It was meant to be my magnum opus, a comprehensive history of forgotten voices from the Low Country, drawing heavily on my personal archives. But the energy, the meticulous focus required, seemed to have evaporated with her. My memory, too, felt less reliable, a name on the tip of my tongue, a date just out of reach. It was a terrifying thought for a historian, a scholar whose very identity was built on recall and precision. My children, bless their hearts, saw my struggle. They suggested I get help, a research assistant. The idea felt like an admission of defeat at first, a concession to age, but the thought of leaving my life's work unfinished, of those stories untold, gnawed at me. So with a heavy heart, I placed an ad. That's how Vivian entered my life. She was young, fresh out of the College of Charleston, brimming with what seemed like an infectious enthusiasm. Her resume was impressive, her references glowing, speaking of diligence and a keen mind. I remember her sitting across from me in my study, the afternoon light filtering through the ancient live oaks making the dust motes dance. She had a bright, eager smile, her eyes wide with what I mistook for genuine interest as I spoke of my collection, my dreams for the book, and the quiet fear that time was slipping away. She listened intently, nodding, asking intelligent questions that made me feel seen, understood. She talked about the importance of preserving history, of giving voice to the past. It was exactly what I needed to hear. A surge of hope, fragile but real, started to bloom within me. Perhaps, with her help, I could indeed finish this book, honor Martha's memory, and cement my own legacy before the inevitable took its toll. She started a week later, bringing a renewed energy to the quiet house, a purpose beyond just enduring the days. For a while, the silence didn't feel quite so heavy. Vivian quickly became indispensable. She was incredibly organized, turning my carefully, if somewhat chaotically arranged piles of documents into an accessible, searchable system. She digitized fragile letters, cross-referenced forgotten notes, and even helped me navigate the bewildering world of modern databases. I found myself relying on her more and more, not just for her keen organizational skills, but for her presence. She would often make me tea, listen patiently as I recounted anecdotes about historical figures, or simply sit quietly while I worked, a comforting, unobtrusive presence in the study. I started to confide in her, sharing my deepest insecurities. I told her about the fear that stalked me, the creeping forgetfulness, the struggle to articulate complex ideas that once flowed effortlessly. I spoke of Martha, of the immense void she left, and how it made me question my own capacity to carry on. Vivian always listened with an empathetic nod, offering words of encouragement, telling me I was still brilliant, still sharp. She said my wisdom was invaluable, a treasure trove of knowledge that simply needed a steady hand to help polish it. It was exactly what my fragile ego, reeling from grief and the anxieties of aging, desperately needed to hear. I opened up about the collection itself, not just its historical significance, but its more practical aspects. I mentioned how certain rare letters, those from Revolutionary War figures or early abolitionists, held considerable monetary value. I spoke of the eventual donation plans to the Charleston Historical Society, a promise Martha and I had made, and the meticulous family arrangements we had put in place to ensure everything was handled correctly, the insurance valuations, the appraisals we'd had done years ago. I even foolishly showed her where some of the particularly sensitive documents were stored, tucked away in climate-controlled archival boxes. I felt a bond forming, a mentor-mentee relationship that blossomed into something akin to a fragile friendship. She became my sounding board, my confidant, a bridge to a world that felt increasingly distant. I never noticed the small, almost imperceptible way she would angle her bag on the desk sometimes, nor the faint, almost inaudible click that occasionally accompanied her movements. I was too busy basking in the warmth of her attention, the validation she offered, feeling less alone, less adrift. My guard, which had always been formidable, slowly, subtly came down. The shift was so gradual, I almost didn't notice it at first. A subtle coolness in her manner, A slight hastiness when I asked her to recheck something trivial, a flicker of impatience in her eyes when I rambled a bit too long about a minor historical tangent. I dismissed it as my own paranoia, or perhaps a natural sign of her youthful energy clashing with my slower pace. She'd been working for me for several months, and the initial honeymoon period of effusive enthusiasm was bound to wane. I told myself it was fine, that I was simply being overly sensitive, a consequence of my emotional state. Then came the morning she resigned. It was abrupt, jarring. She walked into my study, not with her usual cheerful greeting, but with a stiff formality. She said she had received an unexpected job offer, a fantastic opportunity she simply couldn't pass up. My stomach lurched. I felt a sudden, profound sense of loss, a fear of being left alone with the monumental task once more. I tried to mask my disappointment, wishing her well, even offering to write a glowing recommendation. She accepted with a polite, almost too quick smile, packed her things and was gone by noon. The house, after months of her quiet presence, plunged back into a silence that felt heavier, more oppressive than before. I tried to pick up where we left off, to reclaim the reins of my project. But something felt off. Files seemed out of place, certain digital documents were missing from the shared cloud drive we'd set up, and my contacts list, usually meticulously updated, seemed to have been tampered with. I tried to tell myself it was just my memory playing tricks, a testament to the very fears I'd confessed to Vivian. Maybe I was just disoriented without her efficient system. Then the phone rang. It was David Jenkins, a local journalist from the Charleston Post and Courier. He had a peculiar set of questions for me. He asked rather delicately about the state of my mental faculties, about my recent widowhood, and then more pointedly about certain items in my collection. He mentioned letters from General Nathaniel Greene, some rare colonial pamphlets, and even a unique set of deeds relating to a historic plantation, all of which were very much part of my private archives. He said he'd received an anonymous tip accompanied by some rather sensitive audio snippets suggesting these items might be coming up for auction. He wondered if I was aware of this, if perhaps I had misplaced them or forgotten their whereabouts. My blood ran cold. My heart hammered against my ribs. Misplaced, forgotten, the implication was clear, devastating. He spoke of my incapacity, the word hanging in the air like a poisoned dart. He even quoted me, almost verbatim, on my anxieties about my memory, on my fears of losing control. It was my voice, my vulnerable confessions, twisted, weaponized. The world spun. Vivian. It could only be Vivian. The article hit the next day, a carefully worded piece that walked a tightrope of insinuation. It began with a sympathetic nod to my recent loss, and celebrated my distinguished career, only to pivot sharply, citing unnamed sources and private documents that suggested a recent decline in Professor Thomas's ability to manage his vast and valuable collection. It highlighted the upcoming auction of several significant historical artifacts, complete with provenance details, that could only have come from my most private records. The journalist David Jenkins even subtly wove in edited snippets of my own recorded voice, painting a picture of an aging scholar teetering on the brink of senility, incapable of safeguarding his own legacy. It didn't explicitly accuse me of anything, but the implication was clear. I was losing my mind, and my precious collection was adrift because of it. I sat there, the newspaper shaking in my hands, the crisp Charleston air failing to cool the furious flush on my face. My reputation, built over 5 decades of meticulous scholarship, of careful verification and unwavering integrity, was being publicly dismantled piece by agonizing piece. The phone started ringing almost immediately. Concerned colleagues, bewildered friends, even a few thinly veiled accusations from fellow historians, their voices laced with a chilling mix of pity and suspicion. My legacy, my life's work was not just being questioned, it was being actively undermined, used against me. The betrayal was a physical ache, a searing pain in my chest. Vivian, the young woman I had welcomed into my home, to whom I had poured out my fears, my vulnerabilities, had not only stolen from me, but was using my own words, my own aging anxieties to discredit me entirely. Despair, a deep, suffocating blanket, settled over me. I felt exposed, humiliated, utterly helpless. How could I fight this? How could I prove my competence against my own manipulated confessions? The irony was brutal. The very fear I had confessed, the fear of losing my memory, was now being used as proof that I had already lost it. I stumbled through the days, the weight of public embarrassment pressing down on me. I stopped answering calls, let the mail pile up. My study, once a sanctuary, now felt like a tomb of broken dreams. The scent of old paper, usually a comfort, now felt like a taunt. I could see the headlines in my mind, the knowing glances, the whispers. The idea of finishing my book, of facing the academic world, felt impossible. How could I, Thomas the careful historian, write about truth when my own truth had been so cruelly distorted? Martha's face would appear in my mind, her eyes disappointed, and I would sink deeper into my despair. The thought of her memory sullied by this scandal almost unbearable. My children, Eleanor and Daniel, saw me fading. They came, full of righteous anger on my behalf, and their love, fierce and unwavering, was the first crack in the wall of my desolation. They didn't question me. They questioned the story. My children were my anchors. They saw the shell I had become, but they didn't let me wallow. Eleanor, with her sharp lawyer's mind, took charge. Daniel, ever the practical one, offered unwavering emotional support. We sat around my dining table, the same table where Martha and I had hosted countless academic dinners, and slowly, painstakingly, I recounted everything, every detail of Vivian's time here, every confession, every item I'd shown her. My voice trembled as I spoke of the recorded snippets, the way she had twisted my deepest fears against me. They listened intently, their faces hardening with each revelation. Eleanor insisted we consult a lawyer specializing in intellectual property and, more importantly, elder abuse. The idea felt daunting, exposing my vulnerability further, but their conviction was infectious. The lawyer, a no-nonsense woman named Ms. Davies, listened without judgment, her pen scratching notes. We talked about the unique provenance details in the auction listings, details only I could have known, or details someone who had intimately studied my private archives would possess. Then, Ms. Davies had an idea, a hunch based on Vivian's abrupt departure and the digital irregularities. She delved into Vivian's background. It didn't take long. Vivian had a criminal record, a history of similar meticulously planned schemes involving vulnerable seniors and their valuable possessions, usually leveraging their trust and then exploiting their age or memory concerns. The shock of it, the cold, calculated premeditation, hit me with a fresh wave of nausea, but also a stark clarity. This wasn't just a betrayal, it was a crime. The police investigation began, a whirlwind of interviews and evidence gathering. My home, usually a place of quiet reflection, now buzzed with law enforcement officers. They meticulously cataloged the missing digital files, the altered contact lists. Ms. Davies' focus on the audio recordings was crucial. She argued that the edited snippets presented in the article were clear manipulation. They demanded the full, unedited recordings from the journalist, arguing they were part of a criminal investigation. When they were finally recovered and analyzed in full context, my incapacity vanished. Instead, they revealed a terrified old man confiding in someone he thought he could trust, a meticulous scholar meticulously detailing his collection and anxieties about its future, only to have his words recorded and later weaponized. It was proof, undeniable proof, of Vivian's premeditated manipulation, her careful cultivation of my trust, her insidious plan to exploit my grief and my fears. The realization was liberating, a sudden shedding of the heavy cloak of shame. I wasn't senile, I was a victim. My memory hadn't failed me, my judgment had in trusting the wrong person. The truth, the historical truth I had always sought, was finally shining through the manufactured fog. With the evidence mounting, tracking down Vivian was straightforward. The auction house had been a direct link, and the buyers, unwitting participants, cooperated. Vivian was arrested and charged, her elaborate scheme unraveling around her. The news that my items were being recovered piece by precious piece felt like a balm to my raw soul. My name, slowly but surely, was being cleared. The whisper campaign subsided, replaced by murmurs of sympathy and outrage. It wasn't just my vindication. It was a testament to the power of truth, and a reminder that even in betrayal, history finds a way to correct its course. The recovery of my collection felt like a reunion with old friends. Each letter, each rare pamphlet, each deed returned was a testament not just to its historical value, but to my own resilience. The sting of betrayal lingered, a faint phantom ache, a scar that would undoubtedly remain. The public embarrassment had been profoundly isolating, and the image of myself as a vulnerable, easily manipulated old man was a difficult one to shake. But with my children's unwavering support and Ms. Davies' persistent legal prowess, the world had seen the truth. My name was cleared, not just by official decree, but in the eyes of my peers, my community. I returned to my study, the sunlight streaming through the windows once more, illuminating dust motes that now danced with a promise of new beginnings, not fading memories. The silence of the house still held Martha's memory, but it no longer felt heavy with loss or tainted by betrayal. It was a space for reflection, for creation. With renewed determination, I picked up the threads of my final book. It felt different now, infused with a new purpose. It was no longer just about forgotten voices. It was about the resilience of truth, the enduring power of history against manipulation, and the strength found in unexpected places. I dedicated it to Martha, of course, but also to truth, to the enduring spirit of Charleston's history, and to the unwavering support of my family. The words flowed more easily, punctuated by the familiar rustle of aged paper and the comforting click of the keyboard. The book, when it was finally finished, was more than just a scholarly work. It was a testament to survival, to a legacy preserved not by luck, but by fighting for it. I found a bittersweet peace in those pages, a sense of closure that transcended the pain. My legacy was intact, stronger now, secured on my own terms, a story not of frailty, but of enduring strength. The past, I realized, was not just about what happened, but about how we choose to remember it, how we protect its truth, and that was a lesson I would carry with me always.